Hello, my AP students. This is Wendy with AP History Help, and this is the AP History Help podcast, where you will learn everything you need to know about taking AP history classes, from skills to content, from historical thinking skills to themes in history. Whether you are taking or thinking about taking AP World History, AP US History, AP European History, this podcast is for you. Be sure to check out the episode list and show notes to find the topics that you need help with. AP History Help is on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, where I am happy to answer your questions. For the last 5 episodes, I have only talked about all the parts that make up the DBQ essay, starting with contextualization, then the thesis statement, then how to use the documents as summary versus supporting your argument. The next week was analysis or sourcing. And last episode, we talked about the different ways to earn the complexity point. And now, in just one episode, that's right, just one, we are going to go over the LEQ as compared to how you earn the points for the DBQ. There are some similarities between the two, so we'll be able to breeze right through. And of course, we'll spend more time taking a deeper dive into how it differs from the DBQ. But before we get too far along, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you go back and listen to some of those episodes, especially the ones that I'm about to say are similar or exactly like how to earn points on the LEQ. I say it each episode, but I'll say it again. They're all on demand for your listening and or watching pleasure. Come in, students, take your seats. It's time for some AP History Help. Ironically, the LEQ, or long essay question, usually ends up being shorter than the DBQ. Can you guess why? Raise your hand if you think you know. Yes, there are no documents to write about. And yep, you have to come up with the information from your brain, which by the end of the exam is pretty empty. No worries, it doesn't have to be longer. I know I talked about the LEQ rubric back on episode 11, so if you want a refresher, I'd recommend going back and listening to that one. Today, I'm going to breeze through the points that are similar to the DBQ and slow down and spend some time with the ways in which the LEQ is different. I know how hard it is to keep track of all the things you need to know in an AP history class. So I spent a good chunk of time trying to organize things in a way that you can reflect on daily and see the big picture. I call it the AP History Success Journal, and it's available on Amazon. It is set up to be a user-friendly weekly companion on your journey to acing the AP exam. I want you to be able to focus on the important content each day, each week, the thinking skills that we cover in our class and in your AP classroom. And most importantly, you should always take time to reflect on the overall process of what you're learning and which skills you're developing. I've put a bunch of other little tips and tricks in there to help answer a lot of questions that I think you might have. I will put the link to purchase the Student Success Journal in the show notes, but you can also access it through the aphistoryhelp.com website, or head on over to Amazon and search on Success Planner for History Students AP, and it will be at the top of the search results. And podcast listeners heard it first 2 episodes ago. The price is going up soon. The price is low right now to get them out there, plus it's towards the end of the school year, but the value is much more than that $14.97 price tag. I want you to have a chance to grab one before the price goes up. So run, don't walk, to that Amazon add to cart button. And if you're listening to this after I raise the price, get in contact with me and I'll tell you how you can get one for the original price. Let me start by pointing out that the DBQ rubric is worth 7 points and the LEQ is only worth 6. Let's see if you can figure out which one is missing. If you were in class right now, I'd tell you to get out those success planners and open it up to page 94. Notice there is room on the very next page to take notes. I might even have you switch back and forth between page 94 and 84 and ask you to compare the two rubrics, and you tell me what is the same and what is different. But because I know some of you are still waiting for those planners to arrive, I'll help you out here. From the top, contextualization. Is it the same or different than the DBQ? Yes, it is the same. You are still just setting up the topic of your essay with what was happening before or near or after the topic and connecting it. Exact same process and skill. Next, thesis. Same or different than the DBQ rubric? Exact same words. You are writing a historically defensible thesis that responds to all parts of the question and establishes a line of reasoning. So if you got those parts down for the DBQ, you are good to go for the LEQ. Now, the evidence point. Points, plural, points. The obvious and already stated difference is that you don't use documents to supply the evidence. You crack open that brain of yours and you hope to pull out a few things about the topic. This is worth 2 points if you play your cards right. You'll get 1 point for providing specific examples of at least two pieces of evidence relevant to the topic of the prompt. And then to earn the second evidence point, you just need to make sure that those 2 pieces of evidence support your thesis or argument. I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you have more evidence in your head that will help your argument, by all means, put more down. I have always told you that whatever number the rubric asks for, you should give more if you can. So when you're reading through the choice of 3 LEQ prompts to write about, make sure you pick the one that you can come up with 3 pieces of evidence. And now we move on to analysis and complexity. Dum dum dum. They are grouped together to award 1 or 2 points. And honestly, the analysis point here is super easy. You're not using HIP or HAP statements. You don't have to bring up author's point of view or intended audience to source your information. Nope. For that first point, all you need to do is the historical thinking skill that is in the prompt. So, if the prompt says, evaluate the extent to which transatlantic voyages in the period from 1491 to 1607 affected the Americas, you ask yourself, which historical thinking skill am I going to use in this essay? Well, the prompt uses the word affected. The historical thinking skills are going to be comparison, causation, or change in continuity over time. Who can tell me which thinking skill was in that prompt? Raise your hands. Yes, causation. As long as the majority of your essay is about the effects of the transatlantic voyages on the Americas, well, you are going to get the analysis point. As a matter of fact, the College Board says to earn the first point, the response must demonstrate the use of historical reasoning to frame or structure an argument, although the reasoning might be uneven or imbalanced, or the evidence may be overly general or lacking specificity. There is a lot of grace, a lot of leeway there. Just be sure to address the proper skill in your essay. And last is the second half of analysis and complexity, which states, demonstrates a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt through sophisticated argumentation and or effective use of evidence. Does that sound familiar? It should. It is the exact same wording as the DBQ rubric, but the difference is in the details. Yes, you can still get this point the hard way. Multiple themes or perspectives, multiple causes or effects, similarities or differences, continuities or changes, or relevant and insightful connections across periods or geographical areas. I went into much more depth with this last episode when I talked about complexity on the DBQ. It's the same complex way. But the now easier way to earn this point on the LEQ is to bring in 4 pieces of evidence rather than 2. Give 4 and make sure they are supporting your argument. Yeah, it's that simple. But just to be fully transparent, the College Board does say explaining how multiple pieces of specific and relevant evidence, at least 4, support a nuanced or complex argument that responds to the prompt. So yes, your argument needs more, but overall, it should be complex. In the example of the prompt I used earlier, a simple response might be focused in one direction, say the social effects. A complex response is going to talk about social, economic, and perhaps cultural effects. That should get you complexity on the LEQ. Did you figure out which point wasn't in the LEQ rubric that was in the DBQ? Yes, that's right. It was evidence beyond the documents. And that's because all of the evidence in this essay is technically beyond the documents. Because, as you know, there aren't any documents. What the College Board says is, to earn the first point, the response must demonstrate the use of historical reasoning to frame or structure an argument, although the reasoning might be uneven or imbalanced, or the evidence may be overly general or lacking specificity. Well, what does that mean? It means you better make sure that you're responding to the verb or task or thinking skill that is the topic of the prompt. If it asks you to compare, you compare. If it asks you to evaluate changes, you talk about changes. And if it asks you about causes, you discuss causes. Really, it's that simple. It's time for Wendy Teaches History. Sit back, students. It's time for a story. Y'all know how I like to be timely with release dates of the podcast, and this episode airs shortly before St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick is the patron saint and national apostle of Ireland. He is shrouded in legend and devotion. He was born in Britain in the 5th century, and he was captured by Irish raiders at the tender age of 16 and carried into slavery in Ireland. For 6 years, he tended herds in the Irish wilderness, where he turned to his faith with fervor. In a dream, he received a letter from the Irish people beseeching him to return and spread Christianity among them. Moved by this vision, Patrick escaped his enslavement, reunited with his family, and embarked on a mission to convert the Irish. Through his tireless efforts, Patrick left an indelible mark on Ireland, bringing the light of Christianity to its shores and inspiring generations to come. Now, you may wonder why we make such a big deal about it in the United States. And as Irish immigrants to America increased in the 19th and 20th centuries, the holiday evolved into the celebration of Irish pride that we still observe today. One could argue that on March 17th, We all connect to Irish heritage through parades and wearing green. We seem to have a little bit of extra time today, so let me read some excerpts from exemplars with a little commentary on my part so you can hear how it all goes together from contextualization, thesis, effective use of evidence, and complexity. Sticking with the prompt I mentioned earlier, which was evaluate the extent to which transatlantic voyages in the period from 1491 to 1607 affected Americas. I'm going to share the 3 body paragraphs from an essay that earned a 6 based on the old rubric, which, remember, was the more challenging way to earn complexity. I'll also put these in the show notes so you can read along. That is for you visual learners out there. Transatlantic voyages from 1491 to 1607 caused significant effects on the Americas by introducing European diseases. Shortly after the Spanish came into contact with native population, many started dying all across America. The biggest disease that killed the native populations was smallpox. Smallpox eventually killed 8 out of 10 of all natives, even if they did not come into direct contact with Europeans. Disease was the only reason the Spanish were able to conquest Mexico City. Diseases from European animals also decimated native animal populations. Transatlantic voyages from 1491 to 1607 led to a change in the lifestyle of Native Americans. One example of this is the effect of the Columbian Exchange that it had on Native economic ideals. As Europeans sought trade, Native groups began to place monetary value on items which they would not have viewed as theirs to own, but a gift from the earth before European trade. Increased competition for trade also greatly changed the Americas as more intertribal conflicts took place. Other examples of how European voyages affected the Americas by affecting the social structures was the Spanish encomienda system. Within this system, the Spanish viewed themselves as superior and forced labor upon native groups, subsequently sending a message that Europeans had supremacy over native groups in the Americas. Let me point out here that just dropping encomienda system would not be enough to get you evidence points, but explaining what it was will get you those points. Moving on, Europeans also changed American Indian lifestyle by introducing the concept of land ownership. The concept, which was introduced with settlements and fences as Europeans claimed land as their own, disrupted the societal norms of Native Americans. Notice that didn't really quite make sense. I took it word for word from the exemplar, which is a good example of sometimes you could leave out a word or be slightly grammatically incorrect, and as long as the meaning is still there, this person still got a perfect score. And their last body paragraph is the voyages between Europe, Africa, and the Americas also affected the Americas via the destruction of the environment. One example of this is how Europeans brought their livestock, such as pigs and cows, to the Americas and let them freely roam. This roaming led invasive species populations to grow and caused native plants to be destroyed as they were eaten and trampled. Europeans also brought invasive plants from Europe in order to grow them, but these plants destroyed natural ecosystems and overtook native plants. Now, regarding analysis and reasoning, the College Board responded that this essay earned 1 point by presenting an argument using historical reasoning to address the topic of the prompt. The response establishes a causation line of reasoning, noting, for example, that disease was the only reason the Spanish were able to conquer Mexico City. It goes on to say that it earned 1 point by demonstrating a complex understanding through the use of evidence to corroborate an argument. For example, the response states multiple effects of disease, including the death of native populations, the ways disease aided conquest, and how disease decimated native animal populations. Overall, if you know the topic for the LEQ, I would say There is no reason why you shouldn't be able to easily earn all of the points. Are you still confused by how to earn a specific point? I've helped many students to understand what is expected of them, and I'm happy to help you too. In the next 3 episodes, I'm going to talk about just what is meant by these historical thinking skills and what that looks like in the different questions you'll come across. Next week, we'll look at change and continuity. It's what makes this roller coaster ride of life interesting and predictable. Don't forget that AP Success Journal, it's only available at this low price for a short time. I'll link to it in the show notes, or just search for Student Success Journal AP on Amazon. And I would be so grateful if you would tell your friends who are taking or thinking about taking AP History classes about the podcast. I'm here to help as many students as possible to be successful in the course and on the exam. That will do it for this episode. Don't forget to come to Wendy for AP History Help. And this episode of the AP History Help podcast, it's now history.